Hello, I'm Jody Gale, Extension Agent with Utah State University Extension Service. Very pleased to have you here with us regarding pruning and tree trimming, in this case in the home yard. Occasionally trees get too big for the places that they were planted. Good landscape designs are a way to properly select tree and plant materials so that they can be planted in areas where there's enough space. But when trees become overgrown or too large in their place, they need to be taken out. This can be a very dangerous effort when attempted by homeowners. It's recommended that professional tree pruners or tree removal companies be hired to be able to remove large trees. However, often when these trees are removed, there's a lot of growth that comes back from the trunks and the stumps themselves. So what we'd like to do is discuss briefly the technique of removing a tree and then show how to cut a stump off and then treat the stump in such a way with a herbicide so that it will prevent the sucker growth from coming back on the stump. Typically, when very large trees are removed, on the side of the tree where you desire the tree to fall, a large wedge is taken out of the side of the tree, such as represented with this piece. You come approximately a third of the way into the tree on a very flat horizontal cut, then making a downward cut, taking a slice out and completely removing that from the tree. This is an undercutting technique that creates a place for the tree to begin to tip as it's cut from the back side. Once on the back side, you make a downward slope, cutting down in and leaving a hinge or a wedge of living tissue. That hinge literally becomes the place that creates the direction or the plane in which the tree will tip. Once a cut is started with a chainsaw, leaving enough room to clear the backside blade of the chain, typical wedges are very helpful as they're pounded into that opening area, beginning to tip the tree just a little bit to get it to fall away. That's essentially the technique on how it's done. Again, it's a very dangerous thing to do. If trees or fences or other things are nearby, they can very easily be totally damaged by a tree falling in the wrong direction. Only trained professional tree removal personnel should be used to make that type of a cut. Now that this tree has been cut and removed, we're going to demonstrate how to cut the rest of the stump off and exposing the cambium area, which is the place that must be treated on the outside edge of the stump with a herbicide in order to prevent it from sending up suckers, as we will demonstrate in a few minutes. Once the tree has been freshly cut, it's time to apply the herbicide fairly quickly. The way the herbicide is mixed, again, you should have on protective safety equipment, glasses to be able to prevent against splashback into your eyes, some type of latex or vinyl gloves to protect your hands. These particular products, even though they're very, very safe to use in their concentrated form, you should make typical preventative measures to reduce your exposure. What we will do is we'll apply the herbicide in their undiluted form. Typically, if you're going to be spraying weeds around your yard using Roundup or 2,4-D or some other product, you would use a couple of tablespoons per the label instructions per gallon of water in a very diluted mix to apply. When treating tree stumps, you use the materials in their most concentrated form, treating just the cambium. Therefore, you don't need to mix them with water. So you apply a small amount of the herbicide glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in the common herbicide which is marketed by the name of Roundup. There are many products that contain glyphosate. Roundup is just simply one of those marketing names that are used that most all of us are familiar with. Another name is called Kill, and numerous other versions of the active ingredient glyphosate. So we're going to add several tablespoons in a small container of the herbicide itself. We're going to add a surfactant or a spreader sticker, which reduces the cohesive surface tension of water and liquids to help spread it out. And we're going to add a small amount of ammonium sulfate, which is a liquid material. It's a fertilizer product actually, and that helps to stimulate the tissue to uptake the herbicide and absorb that down into the cambium area. Once the herbicide, the spreader sticker, and the ammonium sulfate fertilizer have been mixed together, mix this carefully in just a small disposable container, and then this concentrated material is painted around the cambium of the stump in this manner. The concentrated herbicide should be applied to the cambium, which is again the area just underneath the bark, the outside of the wood, but the innermost layer of the bark, where active translocation is occurring, and the herbicide should be applied in that band liberally all the way around the stump. Applying the concentrated product with a small brush is an easy way to get it on. The surfactant helps to spread the material out so it's more easily absorbed into the cambium, and the nitrogen based fertilizer, the ammonium sulfate, helps with translocation and will stimulate the uptake of the herbicide. As you're applying the concentrated herbicide, these types of products should not be come in contact with pets such as a dog or a cat that may like to lick on it. Some of the products tend to have a sweet flavor, and so care should be taken with house pets, family animals, that should be kept away from this product until it thoroughly dries, especially with children. Parents should give warning, especially to very young children, that a poison has been applied. They shouldn't touch it with their hands or play on the stumps until a period of time has passed where the herbicide has been somewhat absorbed and deactivated by the sunlight, and the risk of exposure is passed. Putting on a couple of coatings of this while the cut is very, very fresh, within a few minutes of the initial cut from the chainsaw, is the time when the herbicide will be absorbed in its highest quantity. As you think about how large this tree is, even though we're putting on a concentrated herbicide, there's a lot of underground tissue that the herbicide will need to be translocated into in order to be able to kill the root system and kill the stump so that it does not regrow. The results of this should become very apparent within a couple of months as the spring turns into summer, when the tree would normally be actively absorbing the material, and at that point the growth should cease on the tree. As you apply the material, make sure you use all of the herbicide that you've prepared and mixed so that you don't have a disposal problem or a storage problem with the concentrated material that you've prepared. Again, applying a very liberal amount to the cambium area so that it can be absorbed down into the trunk with what remains, as well as into the root system. You can see from the color change that's beginning to occur that the herbicide is now being absorbed into the wood, and it's a characteristic with this type of preparation that the herbicide leaves this characteristic yellow appearance. With the Roundup herbicide, or the active ingredient called glyphosate, glyphosate is a very common, very safe homeowner type herbicide to use. It's a great weed control product. It also works well for this type of an application. With all herbicides, you should read, follow, and understand the instructions that are on a herbicide label, protecting yourself, protecting the environment, so that there's no contamination that's not intended. From a practical standpoint, the active ingredient glyphosate is totally deactivated when it comes in contact with soil, unlike many other herbicides. Many other herbicides are active in their various forms of the various chemistries that are present in the many products that are commercially available. Roundup was discovered many years ago. It's been widely used for a number of years. One of the great features of the herbicide is that it's totally deactivated or bound up on soil particles, making it not available to the environment. So if this stump were to have been exposed to dirt, or if the wind was blowing hard and it was a very dusty day and the stump was coated with dirt and if we attempted to apply the herbicide, the dirt would bind up the herbicide and prevent it from being absorbed down into the stump. This is particularly important to remember anytime you use Roundup in any application. If you have a period of time when you're doing active weed control in your yard, if there's a day or two before, if the wind has been blowing, maybe there's been just a few raindrops, just enough to make the plants wet, but there's been a lot of dust in the air and a lot of wind activity. As those plants become coated with moist rain or maybe leftover melt from snow, and if dust is blown onto the surface of that plant, that coating of dust on the surface of the plant will bind up the Roundup, the herbicide glyphosate, and prevent it from being absorbed into the plant, and it will not kill a plant. Often I'll receive complaints at the office that someone has applied the herbicide glyphosate for a particular application and it didn't kill their weeds. And upon further discussing with them the circumstances and weather conditions, I'll often find that there's been very dirty or very dusty conditions. So anytime you use a product such as the herbicide Roundup, the name being the active ingredient name called glyphosate, remember to read and follow the label instructions. Apply it correctly, protecting yourself and the environment. But they're great tools to use because this will kill this stump and prevent the suckers from growing, and avoid a problem on another stump that I'll be showing you in just a moment where this was not accomplished when it was cut down. This is a stump of a hybrid poplar that was cut down a year ago, and this is what happens when the cambium area is not treated with a herbicide as we have demonstrated. You have this very vigorous shoot growth. Some of these are approaching 11 feet tall. All of these are very vigorous sucker growth, making a nuisance to be able to continue to cut off year after year until the stump eventually dies. So the advantage in applying a herbicide is you kill the stump, preventing this type of growth from occurring. This very vigorous shoot growth from this hybrid poplar stump does have very actively growing tissue in it. In the case of hybrid poplars, they're very easy to propagate if you wanted to develop a new tree. It would be impossible to develop a tree from these sprouts that are coming off from the stump and likely be successful. These are very weak-wooded. Where they come out of the stump, they break off frequently, as you can see from this one in my hand. However, you can make a cutting out here on the tip, capturing 4 or 5 buds early in the year, such as in early March. They can be planted in freshly tilled soil, and you can develop a very young, tender tree that over a period of a few years you can eventually grow into a large tree such as this. Again, thank you for joining us in this segment of tree care in the home yard.